Assalamu alaikum students. Here is 𝗙𝗲𝗀𝗃 and you're watching Learn English with 𝗙𝗲𝗃. Students, I thought let's make a video lecture about a concept that in which the most of the language students are confused in. Today I have made a video lecture which is quite interesting in its respect, and also quite you can say a cure for all of your ambiguities. So without wasting time, let's introduce you with the topic. The topic is, what is standard language? Okay, what are the different varieties of language, dialects, accents, register, and jargon? Students, when we say language, we have multiple varieties in a specific language, right? We have multiple dialects, we have multiple ways to pronounce the words in a language, we have multiple field specific vocabularies, we have multiple types, right? And sometimes we say this language is standard and this language is non-standard, and we literally don't have any idea what is the difference between them and how can we differentiate them. And if students know them, they have vague concepts and ambiguous ideas about all of these terms, because these terms are quite interlinked with each other. All of these terms are interlinked. You cannot separate them from each other because they are of uniform nature, or you can say they are in the merged form. You need to separate them by yourself. They are like combined together. So let's study them deeply and find out their differences. Standard language. Students, what do you mean by standard? Have you gone through my video lecture in which Bell's 7 language criteria, in which I have described standardization? Okay, if no, then I will explain it. Okay, standardization means anything which can be taken as a standard, right? From the word standard we can infer that something which is standard, right? And how a language can be a standard, how can you standardize a language or the variety of the language? When the grammar books, okay, when the dictionaries are made in a language, that language becomes standardized. Okay, in English, for example, we have multiple grammar books, we have dictionaries, then English is a standard language, right? It is clear that English is a standard language, but in every country, like in America, in Australia, in Britain, they all have their own standardized varieties that is accepted by the government for the purpose of the using them in education, in public sectors, in politics, and in formal environments. Okay, first of all, it is clear that a standard language is a language which is standardized. This is the point, that English is a standardized language. Okay, Urdu is a standardized language. Why Urdu is a standardized language? We have multiple grammar books in Urdu. Urdu is a developed language. In Urdu we have dictionaries, so English is a standardized language. But now the thing is, what variety of English has been taken as a standard by Pakistan? This is the question. So similarly, English is a standard language, but what is the standard variety in different areas of the world? This is the question, and this is how you can say this is the meaning of standard language. Standard language is, first of all, there are 2 points. One is a language is a standard or not a standard language, and the second point is that in which country which variety has been taken as a standard. Okay, first of all, let me erase that. Sorry, wait a minute. Okay, then we have a particular variety of the language. Okay, the definition: a particular variety of the language that is regarded as the most correct, widely accepted, or neutral form of the language used by the population for public and formal purpose. Okay, a particular variety of the language which is regarded as the correct, widely accepted. It is considered to be the correct language, widely accepted by the citizens, or neutral form, which we cannot associate with a certain group, with a certain profession or with a certain social class. It is a language of everyone for the purpose of the public and formal environments, education, media, etc. For example, received pronunciation or the British English. It's a standard language variety. You cannot associate that language variety, that standard language variety, with any social class, with any ethnic group, with any family. It's the language of the British formal environment, of the British education system, of the British public system, of the British political setup. Okay, it's the neutral form, which is usually or mostly all the time, you can say, is accepted and is identified by the government, because in the background of standard language variety there is power, there is dominance, and there is privilege which is given to the standard varieties. A variety of the language standardized and promoted by some authority, which is the government. A variety, a type of the language that is standardized, in which we have dictionaries and grammar, and promoted by the government. A variety of language standardized and promoted by some authority, the same one. The language which has gone through the process of standardization. Okay, I have discussed the another aspect of standard languages. A language is said to be standard when we have the standardization process in there. What is the standardization process? We have dictionaries and we have grammar books, right? And the standard language means different, and standard language variety or standard variety of language means a little bit difference. So English is a standard language, but in British, the British English, Britain, the British English is standard. In America, the American English is standard. In Australia, the Australian one is standard. But overall, the English is a standard language because we have gone through the process of standardization in the English language. I am repeating few points again and again. You don't need to be annoyed by it, but actually these things are quite tricky, because after watching this video lecture you will again say I don't understand, because these things are quite tricky and confusing and quite mixing into each other. So that's why I'm a little bit being annoying and repeating these things again and again, and don't take me wrong, I'm doing it on purpose. Standard varieties in English. Now let's move forward. We have discussed what is standardization, we have discussed what is the standard language, and we have discussed the standard variety, how is taken. Okay, now standard varieties in English. American English. Okay, American English is the standard variety of the American government, which is used by the USA, right? USA. And in it we have multiple dialects and registers, which we will discuss them later. I can explain it in a little bit. Is that American English is the standard variety, but the way people speak in different social classes, the way people speak in different ethnic groups can be different. Okay, but written form would be the same, because government has taken it for the purpose of education, public sector, politics, etc. British English has multiple dialects and sociolects, but British English, the RP, which we say Queen English, or the received pronunciation, which is the standard variety taken by the British government for their formal environments. Next we have Australian English, the same concept, that is taken by the government. Indian English. Okay, in Indian English, is the variety which is spoken in the India. Okay, they consider themselves as having the distinguished variety in their country India, and they're working very much to get themselves distinguished by the native speakers of English, because India is from the outer circle country, which they don't have English as a native language, so they are trying their best to get distinguished by the native speakers. New Zealand English, the same concept. The New Zealand English has been taken as a standard variety in the New Zealand, but you cannot say that in America we have British English as a standard variety. No, in America we will have American English. Similarly, in British English we don't have American English. We can say that every country has declared their own variety and chosen their own variety to be standardized, but overall we can say that English itself is a standardized language because of going through from the standardized process. Varieties in language. So now let's move forward to the simple variety means. I mean, standard variety is somewhat different, right? The variety which is standardized. But what is the variety in a language? you don't need to be confused between varieties, dialects, sociolects, etc., because variety will be the general term and all of the further concepts will fall into it. I'm repeating it because most of the students will again be confused in the concept that what is the difference between variety and the dialect, what is the difference between variety and jargon, what is the difference between variety and sociolect. So everything on which the language is distinguished, whether on the social level, whether on the society level, whether on the social class level, whether on the region level, it will be in the form of variety. So variety is the bigger umbrella, and all of the terms that I will discuss and I'm discussing right now will fall into the concept of variety. So variety is the bigger thing, right? And all of the things are the smaller portion of it. So variety is a term used for the specific form of the language. It will be a specific form of the language, type of the language, neutral to that form is dialect. It could be the dialect, it could be the accent, it could be the register, etc., and to its prestige level, standard language. Even standard language itself also a form of the variety. Different dialects that is spoken by different people, from the labor class to the upper class to the higher class, these are the varieties. And accents, the way we speak, is also the variety. So variety is the bigger term and on which all of the other terms came into being. Okay, variety is said to be having any variation, whether on the region, social class, field, etc. So any kind of variation will fall into the variety. Then we will further distinguish it into dialects, then we will further distinguish it into the jargon and sociolect and ideolects, etc. Things to remember for variety. So there are a few things that you should keep in mind to fully understand the nature of the varieties of the language. Variety is a broader term. Okay, I have discussed it already. Variety can be used for standard language, so don't get yourself confused that what is standard language. Standard language is also the chosen variety by the government, is also the chosen variety for the public sector, for the formal sector, for the education, for the politics. So it's also a variety, na? Variety can be used for any dialect. Variety, the word variety can be used for any dialect. What is dialect? Dialect is the distinguished language based on the region. For example, the dialect of the Urdu is different from the dialect of Sargodha and from the dialect of the other places in Punjab. Similarly, English has different ways of using the language and different norms and grammars basis having the roots on the basis of the geography. I mean, the language differences based on the geography is called dialect. I mean, the people from different places of Britain will speak differently, will have difference a little bit in their grammar and norms. This will be called dialect. Sociolect, the upper class would speak differently, the lower class will have different structures. This is what ideolect is, the personal way how we use language. For example, your father will speak differently and you speak differently. So this is the variety you guys are sharing, or you guys are being distinguished with, because after all, every language form has its identification as a separate variety of that language. So every variety will again to be distinguished as the dialect, sociolect. So variety is a broader term. Okay, now you will all are very be annoyed right now that your teacher is not explaining the things that he is discussing, dialect or everything. So stay calm, I will discuss each and every point here. So don't skip the video, don't skip anything. Okay, dialect. A dialect is the language used by the people of specific area, class, district or any other group of people. Okay, when language has language changes from even from 20 kilometers to 30 kilometers, right? After every 30 kilometer somehow the language changes. What are the changes? Changes are in a little bit in the structure, in the pronunciations. The spoken variety of the language that changes from the area is called dialect. The term dialect involves the spelling, right? There can be a little bit different, the difference will be very small. Okay, there the term dialect involves the spelling, sounds, grammar and pronunciation used by the particular group of people. For example, from the group of Welsh people. Okay, from the group of Cockney, the Londoner labourers. Okay, and it distinguishes them from other people around them. So they identify themselves with their varieties based on their region, based on their culture, based on their social class, right? Next is examples of dialect. Okay, there is there is a sentence and I will pronounce it and you will understand the difference of the dialect from the standard variety. Okay, Jim, we is save. Instead of saying we are save, the Jim is saying we save. Huck, we save. Jump up and crack your heels up. Now your instead of the your heels, that's instead of that's the difference in the sound. That's the good all. Cairo at last. Omission of T. At last. I just know it. I just. Sound difference and all of the differences can be seen. Huck, I'll take the canoe and go same. Jim, it mightn't be, reckon I have almost. Okay. There is another example from reckon I have almost died first year I come to school and ate them pecans. Instead of saying eat them, ate them. Pecans, fox say he. Okay, instead of saying poisoned, peasant, it's the uneducated class who is using the language and the dialect difference on the basis of the education, on the basis of the social class, and put them over on the school side of the fence. So much reduction, so much mistakes. Now you sometimes even need translation in the standard variety to understand dialects, because sometimes some dialects are very thick and diverged from the standardized varieties. I suppose I have the first year I come to school and ate, okay, instead of it, okay, ate those pecans. I almost died. Some people accuse him, Mr. Readily, of poisoning them. Okay, poisoned them, wrong sound, and keeping them over the school side of the fence. Okay, keeping them instead of them, keeping them. Okay, different English dialects. We have different English dialects. For example, Cockney English is the accent or the dialect of English traditionally spoken by working class. Okay, this dialect is depending on the different social classes. The Sussex dialect is a dialect that was once widely spoken by those living in the historic country of Sussex, depending on the region, in southern England. Much of the distinctive vocabulary different of the Sussex language has now died out. Okay, now this dialect was weak, although a few words remain in common usage and some individuals still speak with the traditional Sussex accent. I mean, there are a few speakers left. Welsh English refers to the dialect of English spoken by the Welsh people. Welsh is the area, so on the region you are having a variety, so this is called the dialect. The dialects are significantly influenced by Welsh grammar and often include words derived from Welsh. So words difference, vocabulary difference, and there can be difference in the sounds as well. Okay, accent. Guys, most of the students get confused between accent and the dialect, so I want to explain it here. Is that dialect is the bigger thing. Dialect is something which includes sounds, grammars, vocabulary as well, but accent is only the way we pronounce the language. It's just only this thing, that how we pronounce words, simply the way someone pronounces words in a language. For example, I can pronounce British language in Pakistani accent. Similarly, I can pronounce American English in British accent. I mean, my accent could be different, but the variety and the dialect would be the same. You can speak British English in an American accent. Your American accent is like, I want to do it, walk in, like that. But usually accents are dedicated to various dialects due to the association of dialects with spoken language like Welsh English, Cockney English. Okay, it's just the way how you pronounce words. Accent can be thick or can be smooth and educated depending on how educated you are. There would be no norms difference. There would be no, sorry, I gave you the wrong example. It's not walk in, but you can say American says can't and British says can't, and you can interchange them by changing the accent, right? Accent is only the way the words are pronounced. For example, advertisement and advertisement. This is the difference. This is the accent difference, that how words are pronounced, how syllables are stressed. These are the differences only fall into accent, and there would be no grammar differences, spelling differences, only just the way how you pronounce words, only the way you pronounce words. For example, you are learning, being an American, you're learning standard British English and your accent is still American. This is the fine example of accent. Okay, Pygmalion, there was a play which has the story revolved around the accent. I thought let's take it as a reference here. A novel revolves around a professor trying to make a Cockney speaking girl to speak like a duchess by changing her accent to extreme sophistication and standardized British way. So there was a novel in which the story was revolves around a professor who tries his best to change an uneducated flower selling girl's Cockney accent into the British accent. So this is how the story revolves around, and you can read the summary of that novel to understand the importance of the accent. Register. So what is the register? Language variation upon the basis of situational differences in language. Students in different languages students in different situations, we use different ways of speaking. We speak differently in different situations. For example, we speak differently in front of our parents and in front of our siblings and in front of our colleagues. We speak differently in a business meeting, and we write differently in an email or on Facebook or on Instagram, or situational differences in language is called register, right? The varieties which depends on the situation you are in is register. Spoken, formal, it can be formal, it can be informal, right? I have explained. Written, it can be email, texting, Facebook, letters, CV, business letter. In all of these situations, there would be little differences in your language use. Face to face, the language would be different. Skype or any other video calling apps, language would be different. And there would be slight when you talk on call, even with your mother, the way you use language is different. In front of her, you use the language different. So this slight changes comes from the different situations. So this is what we call the register. Jargon. Okay, jargon means field specific vocabulary which can only be understood by in-group. For example, an engineer cannot understand the vocabulary from the medical field, and a medical doctor cannot understand the vocabulary of a scientist who is an astronaut or someone like that, because every field, every study has got its own vocabulary terms, has its own language system that usually understood by in-group only. For example, medical science, computing, law, all of these are the examples of jargon that in medical it has own specific vocabulary, like in science, in computing, and law has its own vocabularies. For example of jargon, computing, there could be computing jargons in computer field, business jargons, economic terminologies that differs from common usage, scientific jargon, law vocabulary, or the weather vocabulary, etc. Weather forecast jargon examples. Okay, there are a few words that you have no idea in your common language, but weather forecast jargon have those words, and in group can only understand. Ablation, the loss of snow cover from any snow or ice surface by melting, evaporation, or calving. You say melting, evaporation, but they say ablation. Abrupt climate change, you will say it's an abrupt change, but they have proper definition about it. Climate change occurring so rapidly that humans and natural system have difficult adapting. Okay. Absolute humidity, the actual weight of water vapors within a unit of volume of air. They have proper definition of absolute zero. You don't understand what is meaning, what does it mean to be absolute zero, but they have the definition of it in their weather forecast jargon. The lowest temperature possible, minus 273.15 Celsius and 459.67 Fahrenheit. Acclimation, the process by which an organism adapts to climate change in the environment. You will not understand because only in-group can understand it. Computer jargons, we have cache memory, RAM, processor, memory, hard disk, motherboard. We don't use these words in our common language, but computing we use them, and teachers define them for our understanding. So these were a few concepts that were quite ambiguous for the students, and I tried my best to separate them and distinguish them for you. So keep watching my videos and don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you. Stay blessed. Allah Hafiz.